Wetland Restoration. The United States Environmental Protection Agency stresses that wetlands are highly valuable features that benefit people, fish, and wildlife. Wetlands are some of the most productive ecosystems in our world. They play an important part in the watershed and may even help with atmospheric maintenance. They help improve the quality of water, help protect against floods and shoreline erosion, and can most importantly protect our safety and our welfare. Although wetlands are so important, there has been a drastic decline in the amount of them. According to the World Wild Fund for Nature, half of the world's wetlands have disappeared since 1900. There are many reasons for this decline, many of which are caused by humans. Industrial threats are a major part of it, as many wetland areas are being drained for both commercial development and agricultural use. Another cause is invasive species. If an invasive species comes into an ecosystem, it can interrupt the natural balance and cause problems. Pollutants are another issue. Different toxins like nitrogen, phosphorus, and mercury can contaminate water and kill off different species, causing a lack of biodiversity. Dams also cause a lack of biodiversity by altering water flow and impacting the ecosystem. Climate change also has an impact on the decline of wetlands. As polar ice cap melts, some swamps are drowning. However, in other places, the opposite is an issue, as drought may dry up some of the swamps. The United States Environmental Protection Agency has come up with several principles to help guide wetland restoration to make sure we don't lose out on the many benefits that wetlands provide our environment. Many organizations, like federal, state, tribal, and local agencies, as well as outdoor recreation or conservation groups, corporations, landowners, and citizens groups, use the Environmental Protection Agency's principles. The first principle is to preserve and protect aquatic resources. This stresses that the first objective should be to prevent further degradation. It's important to protect aquatic environments that are already there to prevent damage to the healthy ones. Restoring ecological integrity favors to restore the natural processes that occur in an aquatic ecosystem so it can become self-sustaining again. Restoring natural structure changes physical characteristics like channels that have been altered back to their original attributes. This is related to one of the causes of decline of wetlands I talked about before, dams. Although many people argue that dams must be built, they still disrupt the ecosystem, so it's important to be more sustainable in their development. Restoring the natural function assesses what functions the aquatic ecosystem had before and attempting to restore the missing functions. Assessing the functions is also a good way to see if the restoration worked depending on how many functions are missing or not. Working within the watershed and broader landscape context requires a design for restoration while keeping in mind the other parts of the watershed the restoration will affect. Projects should be designed to try and accommodate many parts of the surrounding watershed and not just the area with the most degradation. It's important to understand the natural potential of the watershed. You must look at the history of conditions on site and also try and predict future conditions. Using this information can help establish appropriate goals. Irreversible changes must also be looked at that may affect restoration. Addressing ongoing causes of degradation attempts to look at the accumulation of indirect impacts on the ecosystem, which is more common than one direct impact. This type of circumstance makes it more difficult to address issues causing the degradation. To identify the sources, it's helpful to look upstream and upslope activities that may be causing these indirect impacts. Developing clear, achievable, and measurable goals are necessary for successful restoration. You need to identify the problem, the solution, a strategy to reach the solution, and a way to measure if it actually worked or not. Everyone affected by the restoration process needs to be aware of clear goals to avoid misunderstandings. While planning the project, you need to focus on feasibility. There are many considerations to take into account, like scientific, financial, and social considerations, as well as making sure there's community support to ensure long-term success. Using a reference site can be helpful to model the project as well as make sure the restoration project is on track to be successful. This can get tricky as no two sites are exactly alike, but it's important to choose a site as similar as possible, but also to make sure your project accounts for the differences between the reference site and the site being restored. Anticipating future changes is an assessment that needs to occur to make sure that the project continues to reach its goal in the long term. Restoration planning involves the skills and insights of a multidisciplinary consisting of ecology, aquatic biology, hydrology and hydraulics, geomorphology, engineering, planning, communications, and social science. As many people from different disciplines that resources allow should be part of the project to ensure all of the information is being looked at. Designing for self-sustainability reduces the need for continuous maintenance, which reduces add-on costs and helps ensure long-term success that isn't reliant on human or financial resources. Limiting the need for maintenance favors ecological integrity, which helps the ecosystem adapt naturally to changes in the future. Before starting to actively restore a site, make sure to see if you can use passive restoration when appropriate. This type of approach looks to see if doing things such as reducing degradation and leaving recovery time would allow the ecosystem to naturally heal itself, which would be more ideal than needing to actively restore it. When starting these projects, there should be a priority to restore native species and avoid non-native species. Many American natural reserves are having issues with non-native species because many non-native species are invasive and outcompete native species. This once again goes back to one of the causes of depreciation of wetlands that I talked about before, with the invasive species interrupting the balance of the ecosystem. Non-native species are sometimes so bad for the environment that the primary goal of the project may be to get rid of the non-native species. Bioengineering can be a helpful resource when trying to restore an environment. It's good to try and use natural fixes and bioengineering techniques where possible. Bioengineering combines live plants with dead plants or inorganic material to produce living, functioning systems to help benefit the ecosystems. The last principle in the United States Environmental Protection Agency suggests is to monitor and adapt where changes are necessary. Monitoring of the project is necessary to see if the project is going according to plan, and if it's not, to make changes necessary to put it back on track. It's considered normal for a project to need to change and adapt, so this principle is to put in place in most projects. To understand what we can do to help restore our wetlands, it's important to first understand why the wetlands are important to begin with. We must understand the history of depreciation of the wetlands and find out why to come up with realistic solutions that will benefit the ecosystem in both the short and the long term. Wetlands are important to our environment, and we need to do everything we can to help restore the damage that has been done to them. And contrary to what our President Donald Trump has said, do not drain the swamp.